next we shall discuss how to map supertype and subtype relationships from the enhanced entity relationship diagram into the relational structure. While we were discussing the super and subtypes, we discussed that it's just like the inheritance relationship from the object-oriented paradigm, right? We have a base and a derived class in the object-oriented programming and the object-oriented world, but there we have the mechanism of having an inheritance relationship, right? We can declare an inheritance relationship in the object-oriented programming. What other relations can exist? What other relationships can exist in object-oriented programming between classes? One is the inheritance relationship that we can declare using, for example, if we are programming in C#, which is an object-oriented programming language, we can write the class name, colon, and the class from which that class is being inherited. So we can declare a relationship as an inheritance relationship. What other relationships are there? Composition and aggregation, they are there. So aggregation and composition can be done through code. They can be declared there. But in enhanced entity relationship diagram or in the world of relational databases, we do not have a mechanism of exclusively declaring an inheritance relationship. Okay, here we shall use the conventional relationships that we have just studied, because we can define relationships between entity types. So same relationships would be used to accommodate these super type subtype relationships, because originally this is a relationship between a base and a child entity, between a parent and a child entity. Okay, so super type would be implemented as an entity, and all of the subtypes, they will be implemented as entity types. And what we do with entity types while transforming, each and every entity type is converted into a relation. So super type would be converted into a relation. All of the subtypes, they'll be converted into relations having their own attributes. The super type attributes, they will become columns of the relation representing that super type, and all the attributes of the subtypes, they'll become columns in the relations representing those subtypes. The only addition would be that because subtype के पास primary key नहीं है, there is no primary key in the subtype. The primary key is with the supertype. That primary key would also be added to all of the subtypes. Number one, the primary key which is in the supertype, that would also be added to all of the subtypes. In the subtype, that primary key would act as a foreign key and as a primary key. That primary key which is added to the subtypes, that would act as a foreign and as a primary key at the same time. Whenever some column acts as a foreign and as a primary key, then both the constraints are applicable. Both the constraints of foreign and the primary key, they are applicable. The constraints of foreign key are the referential constraints, that the value in the foreign key must match with the value of the parent side primary key. Now this would apply, okay, number one. And number two, the primary key constraints, they'll also apply. And what are they? They are, we cannot have a duplicate value. We cannot have a null value. Although in referential integrity, we can have a null value, but because it's a primary key now, along with foreign key, so we cannot have a null value in this key that is added to subtypes, number one. And number two, we cannot change the value, because we cannot change the value of a primary key. So now this value cannot be changed. So whenever there is a supertype subtype relationship, number one, the primary key of the supertype would be added to all of the subtypes, and that would act as a foreign and as a primary key. Secondly, there will be a 1-to-1 cardinality relationship between a super and a subtype. The cardinality of this relationship, which is between a super and a subtype, would be 1 to 1. Okay? Here is an example. Let us try to understand that 1 to 1 thing with the help of this example. Okay? So here we have a super type employee with the attributes employee number, name, address, date hired, and employee type. And we have 3 subtypes: hourly employee, salaried, and consultant. And there is a disjoint rule, and there is a total specialization. Okay? So we shall be having 4 relations. Okay? One for the employee and one for each of the subtypes. So overall we shall be having 4 relations. Okay? So the primary key, which is employee number, that would be added to all of the subtypes, and the cardinality between employee and hourly employee, between employee and salaried employee, and between employee and consultant would be 1 to 1. Okay? So this is what we get in the relational structure. Okay? All of the subtypes, they have the same key. That key is acting as a primary key and as a foreign key, because that is referencing to the primary key of the super type. And there is a 1 to 1 relationship between the super type and between the subtypes, which means that against one instance of a super type, maximum one instance of subtype can exist, and same goes from the other side as well. For one instance of subtype, at max one instance of super type can be there, that can exist. So it is not possible that a subtype that a super type instance is related to more than one subtypes instances of the same subtype, or a subtypes instance is related to more than one instances of the super type. So because of this, there is a 1 to 1 cardinality relationship between the super and the subtypes. I believe that this concept is clear to everyone. Okay, with